Well, good Markan Monday to you. Happy to be back with you this week. And a couple things happening this week. One, it's Masters Week. And I know some of us are sad that that's not happening this year. Actually, we hope to come to you. We've got special permission to come to you on Wednesday, live from Augusta National. So look out for that Wednesday. But the other bigger thing that's happening this week is it's Easter. And normally that's such a wonderful, exciting time for us as the church. But this year we're a little bit sad that we're not meeting together as a corporate body in Easter. And so I want to come to you with Mark this week in the midst of the Passion narrative. Remember, Mark's gospel is divided into two parts. One, the whole first 3 years really of Jesus' life and ministry. And then the last half is all just the Passion week of Jesus' going to the cross. And so here in the midst of this passage, Mark 14:53 through 72 really is the culmination of last week. And I just want to draw our attention to a couple things. Jesus has been arrested, betrayed and arrested, and now he's before the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin was the group of religious leaders in the community, the high court, the highest officials of the land at that time. And they had all kinds of power, but they didn't have power to enact the death penalty. So they take Jesus to Pontius Pilate, and Pontius Pilate begins to question Jesus. Jesus, as Isaiah 53 prophesies, is silent, like a lamb going before its shearers. He's silent to the slaughter on our behalf. Silent so that anyone that's really listening could hear that he was living out the prophecy of Isaiah 53. But when Pontius questions him directly, he says, I am the Christ, and you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand in power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Jesus is saying here that, one, he's a suffering servant on behalf of his people, the lamb going to the slaughter. Two, he's the Messiah. He's the Christ. He's the anointed one who's come to save his people from their sins. But three, he's the Son of Man. And this Son of Man reference goes back to Daniel 7, where a Son of Man, one like a Son of Man, comes with the clouds of heaven, and he appears before the Ancient of Days. And as he appears before the Ancient of Days, he's given access. And the Ancient of Days gives him glory and honor and power and a dominion and authority and a kingdom that will never end. And Jesus is saying, that Son of Man is me. I'm the one with all authority and power and a kingdom that will never end. And I'm here to take my rightful kingdom in glory and honor. Even though right now it will look like humiliation, I am the king. And then the second half of the passage, we experience Peter's betrayal and denial. A servant girl asks him twice if he is connected to Jesus. He says no. And the third time the crowd asks him, and he begins to bring down curses upon himself. This is Peter who said, I'll never deny you. And he's deserted Jesus, and now he's full-blown denying Jesus. And as he denies him and the rooster crows twice, he remembers the words of Jesus that this would happen. And Luke 22 says that he looked and he connected eyes with Jesus. And what he saw there was not a Savior that looked away in that moment and said, I'm so ashamed of you, Peter. I'm done with you. Nor did he experience the eyes of a Savior who looked at him and was saying, I condemn you. These are eyes of condemnation towards you. But rather, he looked and he saw the eyes of someone who had compassion upon him, who was merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love, who was full of grace and forgiveness to the one who looks to him and says, Lord, I've really blown it. Would you forgive me? And as Peter recognizes that, he goes outside and he weeps bitterly. Well, Sinclair Ferguson says some fragrant words here, I think, about Peter. I want to read those to us this morning. Here, Mark takes us down into the foundation of Peter's spiritual leadership. He was emptied, first of all, that he might be filled. He was broken down that he might be made strong. He wept that he might know the joy of true forgiveness. And what he says to us here is your experience will not be quite the same as his. And we're not there. We're not the great apostle Peter, but God has not discarded that pattern of molding men and women into the Christians that he wants them to be. And that's the reality, that whatever you might be experiencing in your life just now in the midst of coronavirus, some of you have actually reached out to me and said, man, I'm really struggling with some sin. Jesus doesn't look at you and lock eyes and say, I'm ashamed. I condemn you. He looks and says, I want to have compassion, mercy, and forgive you. Last week, it was a small coin that led to a great betrayal, and this week it leads to accusation and physical assault of the Savior. Last week, it was a small nap by the disciples that led to desertion by all of them, and now leads to a great denial from the chief disciple, Peter. And last week, it was this small act of obedience, this small prayer of Jesus that said, Lord, if you could take this cup from me, would you? But not my will, but yours be done. That then led to obedience when he was taken by the authorities, and now leads to this steadfastness of faith and further obedience that would stand up even under physical assault for you and for me. And that's what Jesus is doing for us. What a great Savior that we have, that we might look to him this Easter week and come in confession and come in adoration as we celebrate what he's done for us over Easter. Well, that's it for today. We hope to see you next week, but in the meantime, look for what we got going on, and Wednesday, we'll see you live from Augusta. Have a good one.